Contracts are the foundation of business and personal transactions, but not all agreements are legally enforceable. Understanding what makes a contract valid can save you from costly disputes and legal headaches. An enforceable contract is a legally binding agreement that courts will uphold if challenged. At its core, a contract requires mutual consent through a clear offer and acceptance. One party proposes terms, and the other agrees to those exact terms, creating what lawyers call a meeting of the minds. For a contract to be valid, several essential elements must be present. First, there must be consideration, something of value exchanged between parties. This could be money, services, property, or even a promise to refrain from doing something. Without this exchange of value, an agreement is merely a gift, not an enforceable contract. The subject matter of the contract must be lawful. Agreements involving illegal activities or those that violate public policy cannot be enforced by courts. For example, a contract to perform illegal gambling operations in jurisdictions where gambling is outlawed would be unenforceable. All parties must have the legal capacity to enter into the agreement. This means they must be of legal age and mentally competent. Minors generally cannot form binding contracts without a parent or guardian, who may also cancel the contract at any time. Similarly, individuals who lack mental capacity due to cognitive impairment or substance abuse may not be bound by contracts they sign. The terms of the contract must be definite and specific enough for a court to determine whether a breach has occurred. Vague or ambiguous language can render a contract unenforceable because the parties' obligations cannot be clearly determined. Contracts can be either written or oral, but certain agreements must be in writing under the statute of frauds. These include contracts involving real estate transactions, agreements that cannot be completed within 1 year, promises to pay someone else's debt, and sales of goods valued at $500 or more under the Uniform Commercial Code. Written contracts provide stronger evidence in court and help prevent misunderstandings about terms. Oral contracts, while legally valid in many situations, often lead to disputes about what was actually agreed upon, making them more difficult to enforce. Contract law in the United States is governed by two main authorities. The Uniform Commercial Code applies to sales of goods and secured transactions, while common law, court-made case law, governs service contracts. Understanding which authority applies to your agreement is crucial for determining enforceability. Several factors can invalidate an otherwise proper contract. Duress occurs when a party is forced into an agreement through threats or coercion. Misrepresentation involves false statements or intentionally withholding important information. Undue influence happens when one party takes advantage of a position of trust to pressure another into an agreement. Unconscionability refers to contracts with terms so one-sided that they shock the conscience. Courts may refuse to enforce agreements where there is a significant power imbalance between parties, especially if the terms are unreasonably favorable to the stronger party. Mutual mistake can also void a contract when both parties are incorrect about facts essential to the agreement. However, courts typically won't allow parties to escape contracts merely because they failed to read the terms before signing. In behavioral health settings, contracts face additional scrutiny. Informed consent becomes particularly important, requiring that parties fully understand the implications of what they're agreeing to. While a mental health diagnosis alone doesn't negate competence, the person must be able to comprehend and reason about the contract terms. When disputes arise, courts assess whether all elements of a valid contract exist. They examine whether there was a legitimate offer and acceptance, whether consideration was present, and whether the parties had the capacity to contract. They also look for evidence of mutual obligation. Both parties must be bound to do something under the contract. Implied contracts can also be enforceable, even without explicit written or verbal agreement. These arise from the conduct of the parties and come in two forms: implied in fact contracts based on the parties' behavior, and implied in law contracts imposed by courts to prevent unjust enrichment. Understanding what makes a contract enforceable empowers you to create agreements that will stand up in court and to recognize when existing contracts might be vulnerable to challenge. Whether you're a business owner, professional, or individual, knowing these fundamental principles of contract law provides essential protection in your legal and financial dealings.